Hey, what's happening, friends? Trumpeter Bobby Spellman here. And in our last episode, we discussed my favorite technique for memorizing melodies and committing them to your long-term memory. But if, like me, you are an improviser, you will be expected not only to memorize the melody of a piece, but also to remember the chord progression to a piece of music so as to be able to effectively improvise on it. Not only that, but if you are a jazz musician, you will be expected to learn quite a wide repertoire of tunes and commit them to your long-term memory for easy access on gigs and jam sessions and the like. One thing that you may have found in your process of memorizing tunes is that it is easier to remember melodies long-term than it is sometimes to remember chord progressions long-term. So I wanted to take a little time today to talk about my technique for more solidly remembering harmonic progressions on this exciting episode of Theory with Bob. All right, before we dive into the memorization of harmonic progressions, I think it is worth mentioning that throughout my career as a music educator, I am continuously reminded that no two brains are the same and every individual person is going to learn in a unique way. So this is a technique that is particularly useful for me and I have found useful, and many of my students have found it useful. But if you have a different way that you like to memorize chord progressions, feel free to leave it in the comments and we can all learn from one another. All right, so as a quick recap, in our last episode, I discussed my favorite way to memorize melodies and commit them to your long-term memory. And that has to do with the idea of putting a recording of a piece of music on repeat, listening to that music to the point where you are able to sing it. And then once you can sing the melody accurately without the music, you can put it on your musical instrument and be able to play it. So if we take, for example, for the benefit of this video, Charlie Parker's Confirmation, I might listen to that recording of Confirmation many times, or my favorite recording of Confirmation, whatever that might be, until I'm able to sing it. Then I can find the first note of the melody. Once I feel like I can accurately sing it, then I can put it on the instrument. Once I can do that, the likelihood that it will stick to my long-term memory and be accessible to me when I need it on a gig or on a jam session is much greater than if I had just read it off the sheet music a couple of times and hoped that I would remember it. Now, typically speaking, when we learn chord progressions, we do not learn them in the same way that we learn melodies, and oftentimes for that reason, it's easier to forget chord progressions than it is to forget melodies in the long term. So, as opposed to, certainly if I'm learning Confirmation, I'm going to know what notes I'm going to play. You know, I'm going to know that it's D, B, F sharp, G. You know, I can go through the whole thing in trumpet key. However, what I'm really relying on is the sound of the melody in my mind's ear, so to speak, and the connection between that experience and the feeling of playing it on the instrument, tied in with all of the theoretical components like what notes I'm playing and what key I'm in, etc., etc. However, when learning harmonic progressions, oftentimes we simply learn them in the same way we would memorize dates from a history book or facts in that fashion. So we might take a tune like Confirmation, and if I were going to do it in concert pitch, I could think of it as being F major 7, E minor 7 flat 5, A7, D minor 7, G7, C minor 7, F7, B flat 7, etc. And I can think of what the chord progression is based on the names of the chords. Now you might also think of it in terms of the relationship of each of the chords to the key of the piece. So in that case, I might think of it as 1 major 7, 7, 5 of 6, 6 minor, 5 of, etc., and go through the chord progression thinking of it in Roman numerals, etc., etc. However, while that is a very useful thing to be able to do to understand the chord progression in the short term, in order to commit the sound of the chord progression to your mind long term, it helps to treat the chord progression as another kind of melody, just like you would learn the melody from a recording. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we dive into trying to hear the harmonic progression as a certain kind of melody, it will be helpful to go through and either transcribe from the recording or learn from a lead sheet what the chord progression is. The first step that I like to take just to make sure that I'm on track when I'm learning the sort of melody of the harmony, so to speak, which we'll talk about in a moment, is to go through and be able to play the arpeggios of the chord progression on my instrument. So in the case of confirmation, that might sound something like this. So I always like to play the arpeggios in time with the form so that I can start to get the sound of that chord progression in my head. Now, from there, I would like to try to commit that chord progression to memory as though it were another melody. All right, so what do I mean by that? So let's say we take a harmonic progression. There are two ways that you can think of a chord progression, and both of them are equally valid and they coexist. All right, they're both the same thing, they're both correct, but you can think of them as just two different things. Now, on the one hand, you can think of a harmonic progression as being a series of vertical structures. So in this case, we have F major 7 is its own vertical structure. Then we have E minor 7 flat 5 is its own little vertical structure made up of 4 notes. Going on to A7 is its own structure. D minor 7 G7, C minor 7 F7 to B flat 7. All of these have vertical structures that make them sound like a major 7 chord or a minor 7 flat 5 chord or a dominant chord or what have you. However, we can also think of these harmonies as being a series of melodies happening simultaneously. So I can take, let's say, the 1, the 3, and the 7 of a chord progression. Now, the 3rd and the 7 are very important notes in the chord because they define the chord. The 3rd tells you whether it's major or minor. The 7 tells you whether it's a dominant or a, dominant 7th, a minor 7th, a minor major 7th, etc. It gives a lot of information about the color of the chord. All right, so with only those 3 notes, I can hear a series of melodies happening within the context of the chord progression. So here, for example, there is just a melody of the bass line. So the root melody might sound like this. That's the melody of the bass line. And then at the same time, we might have the melody of thirds moving to 7. So this is the idea of voice leading. I've never really made a video on voice leading before, but I might be overdue for something like that. But the principle here is if you have a chord progression, especially one that moves, in which the bass motion it largely moves in 4ths and 5ths, you will notice oftentimes that the thirds of chords will move very smoothly to the 7s of the next chord in usually whole steps and half steps. So in the case of this, if we start on the 3rd of the melody, I can hear the melody created by the harmony moving through the chords. So in this case, I might hear something like this. With both the bass motion and the thirds voice leading through the chords, you might hear a melody that sounds like this. Etc. And go from there. Then if I add the 7s, now we can hear So what we have in this chord progression are 3 melodies happening simultaneously, taking us through the harmonic progression. We have the bass motion, we have the thirds moving down, and we also have the 7s moving down. Now, if you can commit each of those melodies to memory within the context of the harmonic rhythm, the form of the piece, that will ingrain this harmonic progression in your mind's ear more firmly than if you just tried to memorize the names of the chords in order. So in order to do that, just like with memorizing melodies, I might try to sing first the bass motion. Now, oftentimes, jazz educators will advise against playing the root note of a chord because the bass player is already playing the root and it gets boring. But if you listen to Sonny Rollins' version of Sunny Moon for Two from his album Live at the Village Vanguard, you will know that you can certainly play the root if you want. Nonetheless, the point here is not that you're necessarily going to play the root, but just that you're going to commit the root motion, the melody of the bass line, to memory. And that might sound something like this. Da 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 da. Then when you resolve to that final note, you can test yourself to see whether you've made it where you want to. All right, on a similar note, I can learn to sing the thirds moving down through the progression. So here's just another melody here that is based in this progression. Da 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 da, etc. Now I can go through the whole A section and memorize the sound of this the melodic motion through the chords, and then I can go to the bridge and do the same thing, go back to the A section at the end, and be able to sing through the various voices in the chords throughout this harmonic progression. If you are able to do that, you will find that it is much easier to remember this chord progression long term and to be able to use these ideas in an improvisational setting in which you're not able to necessarily think mathematically about the chords, but you will be able to hear the underlying harmony of the piece. So in practice, you can practice singing these various voices going through the chords and try to find melodies that you can commit to memory, and that will help to reinforce the sound of these harmonic progressions in your mind for a long time. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about this, you can check out Rand Blake's book, Primacy of the Ear. I've learned quite a lot from this. I was very fortunate to be able to take some classes with Rand Blake at New England Conservatory. He's been there since time immemorial, teaching ear training and the way of absorbing these ideas into your personal sound. And I would certainly recommend Primacy of the Ear by Rand Blake to learn a little bit more about ear training and the way that that can make you a better improviser and a better composer. All right, gang, I hope you liked this video. I hope that helps in your quest for memorizing music. If you liked the video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos on jazz and improvisation. And I hope you have a wonderful time memorizing music and practicing. And we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.
Theory with Bob.
All right, gang, thanks so much for checking out this video. We hope it helps in your quest for the majesty of musical self-expression. The Ridgewood School of Music is currently accepting new students for lessons online or in person in the Brooklyn, Queens, and New York City area. If you'd like us to help set you up with the perfect teacher for the instrument or style that you're interested in studying, you can find us on our website at www.ridgewoodschoolofmusic.com, or you can shoot us an email at ridgewoodschoolofmusic@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to support the creation of new videos like this one, you can find us on our Patreon at patreon.com/ridgewoodschoolofmusic. There, as a subscriber to the Patreon, you can gain access to bonus content, including bonus videos, exercises in improvisation and different instruments, as well as bonus transcription videos. So, if you'd like to help support the creation of new videos like this one, find us on our Patreon, and it's a real big help. All right, gang, have a wonderful time practicing, and we'll catch you on the next one. See ya.